They saw what they wanted to see: a heavy-set black teenager who seemed like an easy mark, someone they could ridicule, someone who'd take their jokes and cruelty without fighting back. They mocked his appearance, whispered nasty comments about his weight, and snickered whenever he squeezed past their crowded lunch tables. In their minds, he was too gentle, too passive, too vulnerable to ever stand up for himself. What they couldn't have known was the truth about Marcus Green. Since age 6, he'd been mastering Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Hidden beneath his loose clothing and gentle demeanor was someone who moved like flowing water, who understood how to bend without snapping, and who could deliver devastating precision when absolutely necessary. Tuesday morning brought the usual mayhem to Westfield High. Metal, lockers crashed shut, rubber soles screeched across shiny floors, and teenage voices echoed through packed corridors. Yet something was different today. A newcomer had arrived. Marcus Green entered through the main doors with measured, careful steps. His bag hung loosely from one shoulder, hands casually buried in his hoodie pockets. He wore nothing flashy, no expensive sneakers or branded clothing. Just a simple gray hoodie, faded jeans, and worn Air Force Ones that had seen countless miles. On cracked city streets, a quick glance might overlook him entirely, but anyone who truly observed, who looked beyond his imposing frame and quiet demeanor, could sense something different. He possessed an inner stillness, a groundedness that set him apart. Marcus didn't move like someone who was lost or uncertain. He carried himself like someone who knew his destination and was fully aware of who might be watching. Eyes followed his path down the hallway. Some students nudged each other and giggled. Others stole glances before quickly averting their gaze, as if prolonged staring might somehow be dangerous. This was Westfield High, after all, a place where standing out wasn't just noticed, it was punished. Especially if you were black. Especially if you didn't conform to their narrow expectations. And Marcus, with his solid build and quiet confidence, made himself a perfect target. The undisputed ruler of this social kingdom was Brady Collins, football team captain, mayor's grandson, possessing an all-American grin that masked a venomous personality. Brady had been studying Marcus since homeroom, evaluating him like prey, making crude jokes to his friends about the new heavyweight champion lumbering through their halls like he was hunting for the nearest all-you-can-eat buffet. The trap was set before noon arrived. Marcus found himself seated alone in the cafeteria's far corner, quietly unwrapping the turkey sandwich his mother had prepared that morning in their modest East Main Street kitchen. No fancy drinks, no energy bars or gourmet salads, just a simple sandwich, a slightly bruised banana, and a scratched bottle filled with tap water. From across the dining area, Brady and his loyal followers, Tyler, Chase, and Ethan, huddled around their table laughing with calculated volume, loud enough to ensure Marcus would hear every word. "Hey, someone grab this dude an extra tray. Looks like he's absolutely starving over there." Brady's voice cut through the cafeteria noise like a blade. Explosive laughter followed. Some kids pretended not to notice. Others covered their mouths, stifling giggles. A few simply stared with wide, frightened eyes, too intimidated to participate, but unable to look away. Marcus remained completely still. He didn't react, didn't glance up, didn't even pause his methodical eating. That composure wasn't born from ignorance. It was a deliberate choice, a decision not to engage in their twisted game, a choice to maintain his self-control. This response infuriated Brady. He wasn't accustomed to being ignored. When he humiliated someone, they were supposed to break down, get angry, or at least show fear. Marcus simply continued eating, unmoved, as if Brady's taunts were no more significant than the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. That afternoon brought new provocations. During the transition between third and fourth period, Brady, accidentally, body-checked Marcus with enough force to send his textbook scattering across the floor. Nearby students froze, anticipating an explosive confrontation. Marcus lowered himself slowly, methodically collecting his books with steady hands, then rose without uttering a single word. No angry stare, no verbal challenge, just that same, unbreakable composure that somehow felt more intimidating than any shouting match could have been. Brady smirked as he walked away, throwing a cocky wink over his shoulder. But somewhere deep inside, a small seed of frustration had taken root. Brady didn't just want easy victories, he craved reactions. Without them, his power meant nothing. That evening in their humble apartment, nestled between Westfield's old brick buildings, Marcus sat across from his mother at their dinner table. The television murmured in the background, playing a Jeopardy rerun while she served him mac and cheese. "How are things going at the new school, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice gentle but laced with concern. Marcus lifted his shoulders in a slight shrug, adding green beans to his plate. "They're just kids, Mom. It's no different anywhere else." Mrs. Green watched him carefully, her weathered hand resting on the worn wooden table. "Do you remember what your father used to tell you?" she asked softly. Marcus nodded without meeting her eyes. "The strongest person in any room is the one who doesn't need to prove it." His father had burned that wisdom into him during those early days at Coach Harris's dojo on Maple Avenue, teaching him to flow like water, fall like autumn leaves, and strike like thunder, but only when absolutely unavoidable. Not for glory, not for reputation, but for survival and dignity. Fighting wasn't something Marcus wanted. It never had been, but if they pushed beyond his limits, he possessed the skills to end things in a way they'd never forget. He could only hope it wouldn't reach that point. Deep down, though, he already understood the truth. Boys like Brady never stopped. Not until someone gave them a compelling reason to. The following morning arrived with autumn's chill hanging in the air as Marcus approached Westfield High's entrance, his breath creating small clouds in the cold. His hoodie was pulled tight for warmth, hands buried deep in the front pocket. He could already sense the hostile attention gathering like storm clouds as he passed through the metal detectors into the wide, echoing corridors. Brady and his pack spotted him quickly. They lounged against the lockers like predators catching a familiar scent, grinning in that particular way that promised trouble ahead. Marcus maintained his steady pace, eyes focused straight ahead, passing them without acknowledgement. That simple act, ignoring their presence entirely, was enough to ignite their anger. Between classes, Marcus stopped at his locker to exchange textbooks. As he reached for his history book, a violent shove from behind sent him stumbling forward, his books tumbling across the linoleum. Quiet laughter rippled through the hallway. Marcus remained on the ground a moment longer than necessary, breathing slowly through his nose, gathering the scattered pieces of his temper before standing. When he finally turned around, Brady stood, there with raised hands in mock innocence, a smug expression plastered across his face. "Careful there, big man. Don't want you falling and cracking the foundation," he announced loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Marcus knelt down, retrieved his books one at a time, and brushed off his sweatshirt with slow, deliberate movements. He said nothing. That silence, that absolute refusal to engage, created an uncomfortable tension among the watching crowd. This was supposed to be amusing. It was supposed to be simple. But somehow Marcus's calm made everyone else feel uncertain about the humor. Brady's confident expression flickered for half a second before he laughed and slapped one of his friends on the back, leading them down the hall as if nothing significant had occurred. At lunch, Marcus claimed his regular spot in the distant corner. His meal was modest once again: peanut butter sandwich, an apple, bottled water. The cafeteria's noise washed over him in waves, shouting, laughter, the clatter of plastic trays against metal tables. From across the room, Brady observed him with narrowed, calculating eyes. He couldn't let this continue. It had evolved beyond Marcus. This was about power, about demonstrating who controlled the social hierarchy. Brady approached with swagger, flanked by Tyler and Chase. He positioned himself directly in front of Marcus's table, arms crossed, wearing an exaggerated grin. "What's happening, Big Mac? Is this your royal throne now, king of the outcasts?" Several nearby students laughed nervously, but most looked away, pretending not to witness what was unfolding. Marcus took a careful bite of his sandwich, chewed thoughtfully, then placed it neatly on his napkin. He raised his eyes to meet Brady's, with an expression so tranquil, so completely unaffected, that it momentarily threw Brady off balance. Brady recovered quickly, his grin becoming sharper and more vicious. He seized Marcus's water bottle and poured its contents over Marcus's lunch, soaking the sandwich, the apple, the napkin. Sharp gasps echoed through the cafeteria. A profound silence fell over the surrounding tables as every eye turned to observe. Marcus stared down at his destroyed meal for what felt like an eternity. His hands rested calmly on the table, fingers slightly curved as if he was carefully considering every possible response. He could feel the weight of the entire room pressing down on him, could feel the heat building in his chest, but he remained perfectly still. He gathered the soggy remains of his lunch, stood up, and disposed of them in the trash can. Then he collected his backpack and exited the cafeteria without speaking a word. Behind him, Brady's laughter boomed loud and long as he exchanged high fives with his crew. To casual observers, it appeared to be a complete victory, but to those paying closer attention, something felt wrong, hollow and unsatisfying. The cafeteria buzzed with uncomfortable whispers long after Marcus had vanished. That afternoon at Coach Harris's small training facility, squeezed between a laundromat and pawn shop on Maple Avenue, Marcus knelt on the weathered mat, adjusting his belt's knot. The air carried the familiar sense of perspiration, aged wood, and disciplined focus. Coach Harris, a lean man with graying temples and razor-sharp eyes, observed him from the mat's edge. "Difficult day?" he asked without preamble. Marcus shrugged. "Same as usual." Coach Harris nodded as if he'd expected that exact response. "You understand what needs to happen if they push too far?" Marcus nodded, the ancient lessons embedded in his very bones. "Stay composed. Control your space. Don't escalate." Unless there's absolutely no alternative, Coach Harris allowed himself a rare smile. "Good. Remember, son, true strength isn't about winning fights. It's about understanding you don't have to." Marcus bowed respectfully and stood. They trained for an hour. Guard passes, escape techniques, leverage drills. Marcus moved with a fluidity that defied his size, his body refined by years of quiet, dedicated practice. Walking home beneath the fading orange sunset, he felt lighter, more centered. The tension in his chest had loosened through the familiar rhythms of training. But deep in his heart, he knew the school situation wasn't resolving itself. It was intensifying, coiling tighter with each passing day, like a storm gathering strength. Just beyond the horizon, Friday arrived heavy with humidity and the promise of rain. Morning announcements crackled over the intercom, while students shuffled through hallways. But the usual chatter was subdued and cautious. Word about the cafeteria incident had spread. Kids who typically followed Brady's every move now watched him with wary, uncertain glances. Something fundamental had shifted, subtle but undeniable. Marcus navigated the day like a stone moving through water, undisturbed on the surface, but aware of every ripple underneath. He knew Brady would make another move. He could sense it in the thick atmosphere, in the way Brady's friends clustered together whispering during study hall. The timing was unknown, but the inevitability was certain. It happened after sixth period, near the back parking lot where buses lined up for afternoon dismissal. Marcus had just stepped outside when he heard rapid, heavy footsteps approaching from behind. He turned just as Brady charged forward, shoving him hard in the chest with both hands. Marcus stumbled backward a step but easily regained his balance. Several students nearby gasped and froze, watching with wide, frightened eyes. Brady puffed out his chest, trying to appear larger and more threatening. "Come on, fat boy. Let's see what you're really made of," he shouted, his voice cracking with nervous energy. Marcus straightened slowly, his expression completely unreadable. He lowered his backpack to the ground with a quiet thud. For one long, breathless moment, he simply stood there studying Brady, weighing his options carefully. He could hear his father's voice echoing in his memory. He could hear Coach Harris's teachings. Stay calm. Control the space. Then Brady lunged again, this time faster, swinging a wild, uncontrolled punch toward Marcus's head. Marcus sidestepped with the grace of someone who had performed this dance hundreds of times before. He caught Brady's wrist mid-swing, pivoted smoothly on his feet, and used Brady's own momentum to flip him hard onto the asphalt. The sound of Brady hitting the pavement was sharp and final. He lay there groaning, too stunned to move. Marcus stood. Over him, breathing slow and steady, every muscle coiled but controlled. Around them, a circle of students had formed, silent and motionless. Marcus didn't celebrate or gloat. He crouched down, his voice low but firm enough that only Brady could hear. You assumed I was weak because of my appearance. You believed you were strong because people feared you, but real strength isn't built on fear. It's about knowing exactly who you are and never allowing anyone to steal that from you. He stood up, shouldered his backpack, and walked away as the first raindrops began to fall, cool and cleansing against the hot Texas pavement. Behind him, Brady remained on the ground, the reality of his defeat settling into his bones heavier than the rain soaking through his clothes. Marcus didn't look back. There was no need. He knew everything had changed. Rain continued falling as Marcus walked through the parking lot, each drop tapping gently against his hoodie. The storm wasn't violent, but steady enough to soak anyone who lingered too long. He moved with his characteristic quiet confidence, steps unhurried, mind at peace. Behind him, whispers began to spread. Students who had once laughed at his expense now exchanged nervous glances, their voices hushed and uncertain. Brady's empire, constructed on fear and mockery, had cracked like cheap concrete under genuine pressure. By the time Marcus reached the sidewalk leading home, he could feel the shift in Westfield High's atmosphere. It wasn't respect exactly. Not yet. It was something deeper and more powerful, understanding. News traveled faster than wildfire. In classrooms, locker rooms, and bus rides home, the story evolved and grew. Some claimed Marcus had flipped Brady effortlessly. Others swore he barely made contact, that it was like watching physics itself turn against the bully. The specific details didn't matter. What mattered was the new reality. Marcus Green was not someone you could intimidate. He wasn't someone you could shame into submission. Quietly and without seeking it, he had become someone worthy of respect. At home, Mrs. Green noticed the change the moment Marcus walked through the door. His shoulders remained broad, his step still slow and heavy, but something was missing, an invisible burden he had carried far too long. She didn't ask questions, simply placed a steaming bowl of gumbo before him, humming an old melody as she ladled the rich broth. Marcus ate slowly, savoring each spoonful, feeling the food's warmth chase away the rain's chill. As evening settled, Marcus sat on the front porch swing, the old wood creaking under his weight. He watched rain blur the streetlights into soft halos, listened to muted sounds of tires splashing through puddles, felt coolness seep into his bones. He thought about Brady, about the expression on the other boy's face. Not anger or even pain, but something deeper. A kind of helplessness Marcus knew all too well. Part of him felt sympathy for Brady. Another part recognized that sometimes lessons needed to hurt to be truly learned. The following Monday, Marcus returned to school expecting some form of retaliation. That's how these situations typically unfolded. One embarrassment leading to another confrontation, a cycle of violence spiraling until someone faced suspension or worse. But when he walked through the front doors with his head held high, prepared for whatever might come, he found only silence. Brady wasn't waiting. Brady wasn't anywhere to be seen. He had called in sick, according to rumors. Some whispered he might not return at all. Marcus made his way to his locker, ignoring how conversations hushed as he passed. He wasn't seeking trouble or attention. He simply wanted to live his life like anyone else. Still, the changes were impossible to ignore. Kids who had once snickered now looked away when he met their gaze. Some even offered awkward nods in passing, uncertain but trying. In the cafeteria, his usual isolated corner remained empty, but now it represented choice rather than exile. No one threw food. No one destroyed his tray. Marcus ate in peace, the hum of conversation filling the room but never disturbing him. Weeks passed. Fall deepened into early winter. The trees lining Westfield streets shed their final leaves, leaving bare branches reaching toward gray skies. The air grew crisper, days shorter. Marcus's school life settled into something resembling normalcy. though it was an entirely new kind of normal. He wasn't part of any particular crowd, wasn't elected to homecoming court, didn't suddenly become popular. That wasn't who he was or wanted to be. But he was no longer invisible, and he was definitely no longer a target. One Friday afternoon, as Marcus closed his locker and shouldered his backpack, he heard someone call his name. He turned to see Emily Carter standing there, clutching her, books against her chest. She was a junior with curly brown hair and a shy smile. "Hi," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say, what you did was really brave." Marcus blinked, caught off guard. He hadn't acted to be brave, he had acted because he'd had no other choice. Still, he managed a small, genuine smile. "Thank you," he said simply. Emily nodded, ducking her head bashfully before hurrying off to class. As Marcus watched her leave, a strange, warm feeling settled over him. Perhaps standing up for yourself didn't just change how others perceived you. Perhaps it changed how you saw yourself. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his mother, helping her organize their monthly bills. She looked tired, the fine lines around her eyes deeper than he remembered. Life had never been easy. For them, rent, groceries, utilities, everything added up, and Mrs. Green worked 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. As he helped her write checks and balance their modest budget, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. He wanted to contribute more, to become more, not just for himself, but for her, for the family that had raised him to be strong, patient, and to fight only when it truly mattered. Over the following months, Marcus dedicated himself completely to his studies. He stayed late in the library, poring over textbooks and taking detailed notes. He joined the wrestling team, not because he needed to prove anything, but because it felt good to move, to challenge himself, to channel his energy constructively. Coach Ramirez took one look at Marcus's size and strength and grinned like a child on Christmas morning. Under the coach's guidance, Marcus refined his skills, learning leverage, technique, and strategy. He wasn't the fastest on the mat, but he was methodical, relentless, and impossible to discourage. By season's end, he had earned his place as one of the team's foundational members, respected not for his size, but for his unwavering dedication. Brady never returned to Westfield High. Some said his family relocated to Houston. Others claimed he transferred to a private school where nobody knew his story. Marcus didn't waste time thinking about him. Some battles, once finished, are better left in the past. On the final day before summer break, Marcus stood outside the gymnasium as late afternoon sun warmed his face. Students streamed past him, laughing, shouting, tossing notebooks into the air in celebration. He felt someone approach and turned to see Mr. Dawson, the guidance counselor, holding a small envelope. "Marcus," he said with a smile, "I thought you should have this." Confused, Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out a letter. It was from the local community college, an invitation to join their summer enrichment program for leadership and academic excellence, fully funded. A path forward, a door opening. As he read those words, emotion tightened his throat. He thought about everything it had taken to reach this moment. The jokes, the shoves, the destroyed lunches, the long nights wondering if things would ever improve. He thought about his mother, about Coach Harris, about the father he barely remembered, but whose lessons had guided every step of his journey. Marcus Green, the boy they had once mocked for being too big, too different, too invisible, had carved out his place in the world, not through anger or revenge, but through patience, resilience, and quiet, undeniable strength. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Then he shouldered his backpack, took a deep breath, and stepped forward into the bright, endless expanse of his future, unafraid, unbowed, and completely, utterly himself.